In today's episode, we're exploring 5 horrifying encounters in deadly crocodile territory, from a fisherman who made one fatal decision to a researcher whose overconfidence cost him everything. Let's begin with the first story, where one man's reckless dare led him into the jaws of death. It was July 4th, 2016, and the remote billabongs of Crocodile National Park stretched endlessly across Australia's Northern Territory, their mirror-like surfaces reflecting the harsh outback sky. The ancient landscape, carved by millions of years of flooding and drought, harbored some of the world's most dangerous predators in its murky waters. Warning signs dotted the area in multiple languages, their bright yellow backgrounds and bold red text impossible to miss for anyone approaching the water's edge. Ryan Mitchell had been camping alone for 3 days, his small tent pitched beside one of the park's more isolated billabongs. At 23, the semi-professional soccer player was facing the potential end of his athletic career after a disappointing season filled with disciplinary issues and poor performance. His regional team contract was hanging by a thread, and his longtime girlfriend had ended their relationship just weeks before this solo camping trip. Ryan had been drinking steadily since arriving at the campsite, working through a case of beer he'd brought from Darwin. His teammates knew him as someone who took dangerous risks both on and off the field, a reputation that had cost him opportunities and relationships throughout his young career. The isolation of Crocodile seemed to amplify his self-destructive tendencies, and the alcohol had stripped away what little caution he normally possessed. That afternoon, Ryan had ignored the clearly posted crocodile warning signs and gone swimming in the billabong despite the obvious dangers. The water provided relief from the oppressive heat, and his intoxicated state made the risk seem manageable. What he didn't notice was that his splashing and movement had attracted the attention of the billabong's apex predator. His phone, left on the muddy bank, contained several missed calls from his mother, who had been trying to reach him since the previous day. The device would later reveal text messages from concerned friends who had grown worried about his increasingly erratic behavior in the weeks leading up to this trip. His social media posts from the campsite showed a troubling pattern of reckless behavior, including photos of him swimming dangerously close to areas clearly marked with crocodile warnings. What made his decision even more puzzling to investigators was that Ryan had grown up in crocodile country and understood the dangers better than most tourists. His childhood in Darwin had included regular safety education about crocodile awareness, making his actions that afternoon particularly difficult for his family and friends to comprehend. The park rangers, who later reviewed his camping permit, noted that he had specifically requested the most isolated campsite available, despite being advised that solo camping in remote areas carried additional risks. Saltwater crocodiles are among the world's largest and most dangerous reptiles, with adult males reaching lengths of over 20 feet and weights exceeding 2,000 pounds. These apex predators have remained virtually unchanged for millions of years, perfectly adapted for their role as ambush hunters in tropical waterways. Their bite force exceeds 3,700 pounds per square inch, capable of crushing bones and holding prey underwater until drowning occurs. Saltwater crocodiles are opportunistic feeders with excellent eyesight and hearing, able to remain motionless for hours while waiting for the perfect moment to strike. As Ryan floated in the billabong, he spotted a massive saltwater crocodile sunning itself on the opposite bank, its prehistoric form unmistakable even from a distance. The reptile appeared to be resting, its eyes closed and body motionless in the afternoon heat. In his alcohol-impaired state, Ryan made a decision that would prove fatal. Instead of immediately leaving the water and retreating to safety, Ryan began swimming directly toward the crocodile. His teammates later told investigators that Ryan had always been drawn to dangerous situations, often bragging about his fearlessness and willingness to take risks that others wouldn't consider. The combination of alcohol, depression, and his naturally reckless personality created a perfect storm of poor judgment. The massive crocodile had been aware of Ryan's presence from the moment he entered the water, its acute senses tracking every movement and splash. As Ryan approached, the reptile remained perfectly still, its predatory instincts calculating the optimal moment to strike. When Ryan was within striking distance, the crocodile's eyes opened, revealing the cold intelligence of a perfect predator. Ryan's attempt to leap onto the crocodile's back triggered an explosive response from the massive reptile. The crocodile spun with lightning speed, its powerful tail propelling its enormous body through the water as its jaws opened to reveal rows of razor-sharp teeth. The attack was so swift that Ryan had no time to react or retreat. The crocodile's massive jaws clamped down on Ryan's torso with bone-crushing force, its teeth puncturing through ribs and vital organs. The impact drove Ryan underwater as the crocodile began its signature death roll, spinning rapidly to disorient its prey and cause maximum damage. Ryan's body was whipped through the water like a rag doll, his bones snapping under the tremendous pressure. The death roll continued for nearly a minute, each rotation causing additional trauma as the crocodile's grip grip never loosened. Ryan's desperate struggles grew weaker with each spin, his body unable to withstand the massive injuries inflicted by the reptile's attack. The billabong's surface churned red with blood as the crocodile maintained its deadly embrace. Ryan's screams echoed across the remote billabong, but the isolated location meant no one was within miles to hear his cries for help. The crocodile dragged his lifeless body to the bottom of the billabong, where it would remain until the reptile was ready to feed. The attack had lasted less than 5 minutes from start to finish. Park rangers discovered Ryan's abandoned campsite 3 days later when he failed to check out as scheduled. His tent remained set up with his belongings scattered around the site, but there was no sign of Ryan himself. The empty beer bottles and his wallet left behind suggested he hadn't planned to leave the area. A search team found Ryan's remains in the billabong after tracking disturbed vegetation and other signs leading to the water's edge. The investigation revealed his blood alcohol level was nearly 3 times the legal driving limit, and witnesses at a nearby ranger station reported seeing him acting erratically earlier that day. The incident became a cautionary tale about the deadly combination of alcohol and crocodile country, prompting increased enforcement of camping regulations in remote areas of the park. But soccer players weren't the only people who underestimated the deadly power of crocodilians in their natural habitat. In Florida, a fisherman's desperate attempt to make money would lead him into a fatal encounter with one of America's most dangerous predators. It was March 18, 2014. And the vast wetlands of Everglades National Park stretched endlessly under the Florida moon, their dark waters hiding countless dangers beneath the surface. The remote waterways, accessible only by small boats and experienced guides, provided perfect habitat for the apex predators that ruled these ancient swamps. Eddie Ramirez had been fishing these waters for over a decade, but tonight would be his last. Eddie Ramirez had been struggling financially since his divorce 6 months earlier, working construction during the day and fishing the Everglades on weekends to supplement his income. At 35, he had developed a reputation among local restaurant owners as someone who could provide fresh fish at competitive prices. No questions asked about licenses or catch limits. His knowledge of the waterways had made him overconfident about the dangers lurking beneath the surface. That evening, Eddie had launched his small aluminum boat from a remote access point, planning to fish through the night in areas where few other anglers ventured. His recent financial troubles had made him increasingly desperate, and he had been taking bigger risks to land more valuable catches. The alimony payments and mounting bills had pushed him to consider opportunities he would have previously avoided. Eddie's fishing spot was in a narrow channel surrounded by dense mangroves, where large fish often fed in the shallow water. He had been using heavy tackle and live bait, hoping to hook something substantial enough to make the night trip worthwhile. What he didn't realize was that his fishing activities had attracted the attention of the channel's most dangerous resident. American alligators are apex predators perfectly adapted to freshwater environments, with adult males reaching lengths of 14 feet and weights exceeding 1,000 pounds. These powerful reptiles possess bite forces of over 2,900 pounds per square inch and are capable of explosive bursts of speed both in water and on land. Alligators are opportunistic feeders that will attack anything they perceive as prey, and their territorial nature makes them particularly dangerous during mating season and when protecting their young. Around midnight, Eddie felt a powerful strike on his line that nearly pulled the rod from his hands. The fish fought with unusual strength and aggression, making runs that stripped line from his reel and threatened to break his heavy tackle. Eddie assumed he had hooked a large tarpon or shark, the kind of catch that could bring serious money from the right buyer. As Eddie fought the fish, his boat began moving through the water in ways that didn't match typical fish behavior. The runs were too straight and powerful, and the fish seemed to be pulling the boat rather than trying to escape. When Eddie finally got his first glimpse of what he had hooked, he realized his mistake too late. The massive alligator thrashed on the surface, its prehistoric form clearly visible in the moonlight as it fought against the hook embedded in its jaw. Eddie should have cut his line immediately, but his financial desperation overrode his common sense. He had heard stories of people selling alligator meat and hide for substantial money, and his mounting bills made the risk seem worthwhile. The 12-foot alligator's rage intensified as Eddie continued to fight it, the hook causing pain and the fishing line restricting its movement. The reptile began rolling and thrashing with increasing violence, its powerful tail striking the water with enough force to create waves that rocked Eddie's small boat. The aluminum hull groaned under the stress of the battle. Eddie's attempts to bring the alligator closer to the boat proved fatal when the enraged reptile launched itself partially out of the water, its massive jaws snapping just feet from where Eddie stood. The sudden movement and weight shift capsized the small aluminum boat, throwing Eddie into the dark water with the angry alligator. In the chaos of the capsizing, Eddie became entangled in his own fishing line as the alligator continued its violent thrashing. The monofilament wrapped around his legs and arms, preventing him from swimming to safety as the massive reptile rolled and spun in the water nearby. Eddie's desperate attempts to free himself only tightened the line's grip. The alligator, still hooked and now even more agitated by Eddie's presence in the water, attacked with devastating force. Its massive jaws clamped down on Eddie's torso, the bone-crushing bite force instantly causing fatal injuries. The reptile's death roll dragged Eddie underwater repeatedly, his struggles growing weaker with each submersion. Eddie's screams echoed across the remote waterway, but the isolated location meant no other fishermen were within miles to hear his cries for help. The alligator continued its attack until Eddie's movements ceased, his body unable to withstand the massive trauma inflicted by the reptile's jaws and the repeated underwater submersions. Eddie's empty boat was discovered floating upside down the following morning by park rangers conducting routine patrols. The scattered fishing equipment and blood on the hull told the story of a violent encounter, and Eddie's body was recovered 2 days later in a nearby channel. The investigation revealed his desperate financial situation and the illegal nature of his fishing activities, highlighting the dangerous lengths to which economic hardship was driving people in the region. However, fishermen weren't the only people who found themselves in deadly encounters with crocodilians. In Australia, a tourist's quest for the perfect photograph would lead her into the territory of one of the world's most dangerous predators. It was August 9th, 2017, and the ancient Daintree River wound through Queensland's pristine rainforest, its dark waters reflecting the dense canopy that had remained unchanged for millions of years. The river system, home to some of Australia's most dangerous wildlife, attracted tourists from around the world who came to experience one of the planet's oldest ecosystems. Sarah Mitchell had arrived at dawn, hoping to capture unique wildlife photographs in the golden morning light. Sarah Mitchell had been working at a backpacker hostel in Cairns for 8 months, saving money from her job and tips to fund solo adventures around Australia. At 28, the British photographer had been documenting her working holiday experience through social media, sharing images of exotic locations and wildlife encounters with friends back home. Her camera equipment represented a significant investment, and she was eager to capture shots that would justify the expense. That morning, Sarah had left her hostel before sunrise to reach the Daintree River during the optimal lighting conditions for wildlife photography. She had researched the area online and knew about the crocodile population, but her limited experience with Australian wildlife had left her unprepared for the reality of encountering these apex predators in their natural habitat. Sarah's photography plan involved walking along the riverbank to find interesting compositions and wildlife subjects. She had brought a telephoto lens but was hoping to get closer shots that would stand out from typical tourist photographs. Her social media followers had been encouraging her to take more risks for dramatic images, and she was eager to deliver content that would generate engagement. Saltwater crocodiles in the Daintree River system are among the largest and most aggressive in Australia, with some specimens exceeding 20 feet in length and living for over 70 years. These apex predators are perfectly camouflaged in the dark water and can remain motionless for hours while waiting for prey to approach. Their explosive attack speed and bone-crushing bite force make them one of the most dangerous animals on Earth, capable of taking prey as large as water buffalo. As Sarah walked along the muddy riverbank, she spotted what appeared to be a large log partially submerged near the water's edge. The morning light created interesting shadows and reflections that would make for a compelling photograph, and she approached to get a better angle. Only when she was within 20 feet did she realize the log was actually a massive saltwater crocodile. The crocodile appeared to be resting with its eyes closed, its prehistoric form perfectly still in the shallow water. Sarah's excitement at discovering such a magnificent subject overcame her caution, and she began photographing the reptile from various angles. Her camera's telephoto lens allowed her to capture detailed shots, but she wanted something more dramatic for her social media posts. Sarah's decision to wade into the shallow water for a lower angle shot would prove fatal. She moved slowly and quietly, believing the crocodile was sleeping and that she could capture her images and retreat before disturbing the animal. Her camera's silent shooting mode prevented any mechanical noise that might alert the predator to her presence. The saltwater crocodile had been fully aware of Sarah's approach from the moment she appeared on the riverbank, its acute senses tracking her every movement while maintaining the appearance of sleep. As Sarah entered the water and crouched down for her shot, the reptile calculated the perfect moment to strike. The crocodile's attack was explosive and devastating, its massive body launching from the water with terrifying speed. Sarah's scream was cut short as the reptile's jaws clamped down on her torso, the bone-crushing bite force instantly causing fatal injuries. Her camera flew from her hands as the crocodile began its signature death roll. The death roll dragged Sarah underwater repeatedly, each rotation causing additional trauma as the crocodile's grip never loosened. Her desperate struggles grew weaker with each submersion, her body unable to withstand the massive injuries inflicted by the reptile's attack. The remote location meant her screams went unheard by anyone who could provide help. Sarah's disappearance wasn't noticed until she failed to return to her hostel that evening, having told her roommates she planned to spend the day photographing wildlife. A search team was organized the following morning, focusing on the areas where she had mentioned planning to visit. Her rental car was found parked at a Daintree River access point. Search teams discovered Sarah's camera on the riverbank the next day, its memory card containing her final photographs showing her dangerous proximity to the massive crocodile. The images provided clear evidence of what had occurred and served as a tragic reminder of the hidden dangers present in seemingly peaceful natural settings. The incident prompted increased educational efforts about crocodile safety for international tourists visiting the region. Yet tourists weren't the only people whose activities brought them into conflict with dangerous reptiles. In South Africa, a desperate man's attempt to provide for his family would lead him into a fatal encounter with one of Africa's most powerful predators. It was November 22, 2015, and the Kruger National Park's remote waterways reflected the harsh African sun, their muddy banks showing the tracks of countless animals that came to drink in the early morning hours. The park's river systems provided habitat for some of Africa's most dangerous predators, including massive Nile crocodiles that had ruled these waters for millions of years. Thabo Mthembu had been tracking one of these ancient predators for 2 days, driven by desperation to feed his family. Thabo Mthembu had been unemployed for 8 months, watching his wife and 3 young children grow thinner as their food supplies dwindled. At 31, the former mine worker had exhausted all legal employment opportunities in his village and had turned to poaching small game in Kruger National Park to keep his family alive. His success with antelope and birds had given him confidence to target more valuable prey. Thabo had heard stories from other poachers about the money that could be made from crocodile skins and meat, with buyers in nearby towns willing to pay substantial amounts for quality hides. His homemade spear and basic hunting skills had served him well with smaller game, but he had no experience dealing with large, dangerous reptiles. That morning, Thabo had located a large Nile crocodile basking on a muddy bank, its massive form representing potential income that could feed his family for months. He had fashioned a crude spear from scrap metal and a wooden shaft, believing it would be sufficient to kill the reptile quickly and cleanly. His plan was to strike from the bank and drag the carcass to shore for processing. What made his situation even more desperate was that his youngest child had been showing signs of malnutrition, and his wife had been skipping meals to ensure the children had enough food. The local clinic had warned that without proper nutrition, his family's health would continue to deteriorate rapidly. Thabo had borrowed money from dangerous loan sharks to buy basic supplies, and their threats were becoming increasingly violent as payment deadlines passed. His decision to target the crocodile represented not just an opportunity for income, but potentially his family's only chance for survival in a region where legal employment had become virtually impossible to find. Nile crocodiles are among Africa's most dangerous predators, with adult males reaching lengths of 20 feet and weights exceeding 1,500 pounds. These apex predators possess bite forces of over 5,000 pounds per square inch and are capable of explosive bursts of speed both in water and on land. Nile crocodiles are highly territorial and aggressive, particularly when wounded or threatened, and their armored hide provides protection against most weapons. Thabo's first spear thrust struck the crocodile in the shoulder, penetrating the thick hide but failing to cause a fatal wound. The massive reptile exploded into motion, thrashing violently as pain and rage drove it into a defensive frenzy. Thabo's crude weapon remained embedded in the crocodile's flesh, connected to a rope he had planned to use for dragging the carcass. The wounded crocodile's violent thrashing pulled the spear from Thabo's hands, leaving him weaponless as the enraged reptile rolled and spun in the shallow water. His desperation to retrieve his weapon and finish the job overrode his survival instincts, and he waded into the muddy water where the injured crocodile was fighting to free itself from the embedded spear. The Nile crocodile's attack was swift and devastating, its massive jaws clamping down on Thabo's leg as he reached for his spear. The bone-crushing bite force instantly shattered his femur and severed major arteries, causing massive blood loss. The crocodile began its death roll, dragging Thabo deeper into the water as it spun with tremendous force. Thabo's desperate attempts to fight back only exhausted him faster as the crocodile's death roll continued. Each rotation caused additional trauma, breaking more bones and causing internal injuries that would prove fatal. His struggles grew weaker as blood loss and shock overwhelmed his system. The remote location meant Thabo's screams went unheard by anyone who could provide assistance. The crocodile continued its attack until Thabo's movements ceased, his body unable to withstand the massive trauma inflicted by the reptile's jaws and the repeated underwater submersions. Park rangers discovered Thabo's body 2 days later during a routine patrol, finding evidence of his poaching activities and the makeshift weapons he had used. The investigation revealed his desperate financial situation and the dangerous lengths to which poverty was driving local residents to risk their lives for illegal hunting. The incident highlighted the complex relationship between conservation efforts and community economic needs. Still, poachers weren't the only people whose professional activities brought them into contact with dangerous crocodilians. In Brazil, a researcher's overconfidence would lead him into a fatal encounter with one of South America's most powerful predators. It was June 14, 2013, and the vast Pantanal wetlands stretched endlessly across the Brazilian landscape, their seasonal floods creating one of the world's most diverse ecosystems. The remote research station, accessible only by boat during the wet season, provided scientists with unique opportunities to study wildlife behavior in pristine conditions. Dr. Carlos Mendoza had been working in this isolated environment for 5 years, but budget cuts had forced him to work alone more frequently than safety protocols recommended. Dr. Carlos Mendoza had built his reputation studying caiman behavior in the Pantanal, publishing research that had advanced understanding of these important predators. At 42, the wildlife biologist was under increasing pressure to complete his current project quickly, as funding cuts threatened to end his research program. His recent work had required him to get closer to the animals than previous studies, pushing the boundaries of safe research practices. That morning, Carlos had identified a particularly large caiman that would be perfect for his tagging study. The specimen was larger than any he had previously encountered, but his 5 years of experience in the region had made him confident in his ability to handle the situation safely. His research notes showed an increasingly cavalier attitude towards safety protocols as his familiarity with the animals grew. Carlos had decided to approach the caiman on foot rather than from his research boat, believing his experience allowed him to safely handle the situation alone. Budget constraints had eliminated his research assistant position, forcing him to develop techniques for solo fieldwork that other researchers considered too dangerous. His success with smaller specimens had convinced him that size was less important than technique. Caimans are powerful predators perfectly adapted to wetland environments, with large specimens reaching lengths of 10 feet and possessing bite forces exceeding 1,000 pounds per square inch. These reptiles are highly territorial and can be extremely aggressive when threatened or cornered, particularly during breeding season when males become more defensive of their territory. Their explosive attack speed and powerful jaws make them dangerous opponents even for experienced researchers. As Carlos approached the massive caiman with his tagging equipment, the reptile remained motionless on the muddy bank, appearing to be resting in the morning sun. His research protocol called for using a restraint pole to control the animal's head while applying the identification tag, a procedure he had performed dozens of times with smaller specimens. The caiman's explosive response to Carlos's approach caught him completely off guard. The reptile launched itself forward with devastating speed, its massive jaws snapping shut just inches from where Carlos stood. His attempt to retreat was hampered by his research equipment, which became entangled around his legs as he tried to escape. The caiman's second attack was successful, its powerful jaws clamping down on Carlos's thigh with bone-crushing force. The bite severed major arteries and shattered his femur, causing massive blood loss and preventing any chance of escape. The reptile began its death roll, dragging Carlos toward the water as it spun with tremendous force. Carlos's research equipment scattered across the muddy bank as the caiman continued its attack, his desperate struggles growing weaker with each rotation. The death roll caused additional trauma, breaking more bones and causing internal injuries that would prove fatal. His isolated location meant no one could hear his cries for help. The caiman dragged Carlos's lifeless body into deeper water, where it would remain until local guides found evidence of the attack the following day. His research station had reported him missing when he failed to make his scheduled radio check-in, prompting a search that revealed his increasingly risky solo research methods. The investigation found Carlos's research notes documenting his growing overconfidence and willingness to work alone with dangerous animals. His death prompted new safety protocols for researchers working in remote locations and highlighted the dangers of budget cuts that eliminated essential safety personnel from scientific expeditions. Thanks for watching. Click the next video that will show you why even experienced professionals can fall victim to nature's most perfectly evolved predators.